Meeting regional players over in Jakarta, South Korean President Yoon says heavier responsibility lies with UNSC permanent members when it comes to sanctions on North Korea, seemingly targeting inaction by Russia and China. This as he condemns the regime's nuclear and missile development. Arrangements are being made in Russia's Far East for a meeting between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin, possibly for weapons supply. That's according to a Japanese media report. On top of China's economic woes, oil prices are cited as a factor in increasing uncertainties in the Korean economy. This as global oil costs are constantly climbing, fueling worries that they could hit the $100 per barrel threshold. It's September 7th, 2023. This is News Center. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon. Attending the East Asia Summit over in Jakarta, President Yoon has called North Korea's nuclear and missile development an existential threat to all. He stressed heavier responsibility lies with UNSC permanent members for sanctions on the regime, seemingly targeting inaction by Russia and China once again. Our correspondent Oh Soo-young starts us off from the Indonesian capital.
President Yoon has called for global solidarity amid mounting threats to regional and human security by subversive forces amid geopolitical tensions surrounding North Korea, Russia, and in the South China Sea. Speaking at the East Asia Summit in Jakarta on Thursday, attended by some 18 regional countries, including the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, the US, Japan, China, and Russia, Yoon laid out Seoul's position on regional and global crisis. On North Korea's nuclear and missile development, the South Korean leader said North Korea's weapons program not only violates United Nations resolutions, but poses an existential and direct threat to all countries attending the summit. He raised the need to block Pyongyang's illicit fundraising activities, which include cryptocurrency theft and illegal transshipment. Amid speculation that Russia and North Korea may strike up an arms deal, Yoon said member states of the Security Council have an even heavier duty of implementing UN sanctions on the regime. Also, Yoon touched on maritime tensions in the Indo-Pacific region, saying attempts to unilaterally change the status quo by force are unacceptable. He emphasized the need to establish a rules-based maritime order in the South China Sea, a key trade route where 21% of global trade and a third of crude supplies pass through. Seoul plans to expand maritime security cooperation with the ASEAN and protect freedom of navigation. The South Korean leader further raised concerns about the ongoing war in Ukraine, calling Russia's invasion a clear violation of international law. He also expressed concern over the ongoing violence in Myanmar and voiced support for ASEAN's efforts to resolve the crisis through inclusive dialogue. Yoon's remarks reflect Seoul's firmer stance on geopolitical issues compared to previous administrations' more trade-oriented diplomacy. The top office says Seoul's growing push for freedom, peace and prosperity, shown in Yoon's multilateral diplomacy, is rooted in the spirit of Camp David, which South Korea, the US and Japan jointly declared last month in their trilateral summit.
We'll strive to respect ASEAN centrality while simultaneously enhancing common norms, values, and predictability. In the process, we believe we can pursue sustainable, long-term growth and development measures across the entire Indo-Pacific region, including with ASEAN.
In their united approach to engaging with Indo-Pacific countries, particularly in the areas of advanced technology, cyber and maritime defense and development assistance, President Yoon aims to create new norms and build cooperation to uphold a liberal, rules-based order in the region and the world. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News, Jakarta.
With the summit between the leaders of North Korea and Russia likely to take place next week, South Korea's intel agency says Kim Jong-un could make a surprise move by taking a different route than what's widely expected when he travels from Pyongyang to Vladivostok. And a separate media report suggests China will send its vice premier to attend the forum where Kim and Putin will likely meet. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji reports.
South Korea's intelligence agency has said North Korean leader Kim Jong-un may take an unexpected route when he travels to Russia for a meeting with the country's President Vladimir Putin. The senior spokesperson of the ruling People Power Party said the National Intelligence Service reported this during a parliamentary meeting on Thursday.
There is a possibility that Kim Jong-un could make a surprise move by choosing a different route than what has been revealed by media.
This comes after the New York Times said Monday local time, citing unnamed American and other officials, that Kim would likely travel from Pyongyang, probably by armored train, to Vladivostok, where he would meet with Putin. It was also reported that a delegation of about 20 North Korean officials recently traveled to Vladivostok by train in late August, and then flew to Moscow to plan for Kim Jong-un's upcoming trip. Separately, citing Russian government sources, Japan's NHK News also said the summit between Kim and Putin could take place in Vladivostok. It reported the meeting could take place at the Far Eastern Federal University on an island off central Vladivostok, where the Eastern Economic Forum will be held for 4 days, starting Sunday. It says security has already been tightened there, and that students and others entering the campus have been instructed to take COVID-19 tests. It added that a visit by the two leaders to military facilities in the region is also being considered. Meanwhile, China will reportedly send its vice premier to attend the same forum. Chinese ambassador to Moscow said this to Russia's TASS news agency on Wednesday, without specifying the delegate's name. There are 4 vice premiers in China's State Council. This indicates that the country's leader Xi Jinping will not be there, ending speculation over a possible trilateral summit between the leaders of North Korea, China, and Russia. Peunji, Arirang News.
South Korea's military has spotted a large number of personnel moving within North Korea as the regime is expected to hold a military parade on Saturday to mark its 75th founding anniversary. The Joint Chiefs of Staff said Thursday that they are tracking the schedule and situation of the commemoration event. No further details were mentioned regarding the military equipment that may be on display in the parade. China's economic woes and rising oil prices could increase uncertainties in the Korean economy. That's according to the nation's think tank. This as global oil costs are constantly climbing, fueling worries that they could exceed $100 per barrel. Our An Sung-jin explains.
Parts of South Korea's economy are recovering as the decrease in exports year-on-year has slowed. Yet external uncertainties are still affecting the overall industry. According to the Korea Development Institute on Thursday, total exports saw a year-on-year decrease in August of 8.4%. Compared to July, when shipments were down 16.4%, last month's figure shows an improvement over recent months. This is mostly attributed to a year-on-year increase in the exports of automobiles, vessels, and machinery. Chip exports also saw an improvement with a year-on-year drop in shipments, shrinking from 42.5% in February to 20.6% in August. However, the recovery in the semiconductor sector was not enough to fuel an overall increase in industry production. Amid fewer working days and a high base effect, production across all industries for July saw a decrease of 1.4%. In particular, production in the mining and industrial sectors, as well as the mechanical components area, saw the biggest drop. Increased economic uncertainties over China's escalating fiscal instability mainly contributed to a drop in business sentiment. Additionally, rising oil prices intensified this after Russia and Saudi Arabia extended their oil production cuts through the end of this year, raising energy prices. Their announcement pushed West Texas Intermediate crude oil to its highest in 10 months, while Brent crude went above $90 a barrel, increasing global market concerns. As long as oil price instability and economic conditions in China prevail, efforts to control consumer price inflation and improve production may be hindered despite some signs of a slow recovery. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
Today, the rival lawmakers at the National Assembly once again questioned the cabinet, this time on the economy, ranging from the government belt-tightening for next year to the budget for the recent Jamboree event. Our political correspondent Lee Si-hoo reports.
The third day of parliamentary questioning of the government focusing on the economy started off with lawmakers pointing out the declining GDP growth rate.
Actual incomes have decreased. How does Mr. Prime Minister evaluate the economy of South Korea?
I want to say that the economy is in a very difficult situation. The global economy cannot freely use fiscal expansion or monetary easing policies as it used to due to high interest rates, high exchange rates and high prices. In times like these, I think it's very important that our economy doesn't fall into a crisis. And I tell you, we've put emphasis on this.
Prime Minister Han explained that the Yoon administration has made every effort to secure long-term fiscal soundness.
More importantly, in the mid to long term, I would say that we are embracing policies in such a way that we can achieve more sustainable growth, ensuring we stay competitive through three major reforms, including one in education.
Part of the administration's plan for sustainability involves tightening the budget. The main opposition Democratic Party, which has asserted the need to increase next year's budget, decried the proposed cut in R&D projects. The Prime Minister assured that innovation relies on the appropriate distribution of support and how efficiently it is used. The ruling People Power Party asked for clarification as to why the budget was slashed for Saemangeum infrastructure projects following the recent fiasco during the World Scout Jamboree held at the reclaimed wetland, to which the Prime Minister replied,
This is due to the massive tightening of the budget. This has nothing to do with the success of the World Scout Jamboree.
The PPP applauded the government's efforts during the Jamboree event, saying that swift decisions led to a, quote, happy ending.
With efforts made by the whole country, I think we had a happy ending, a successful conclusion. What do you think?
Yes, I totally agree with you. While it is true that there were some difficulties at the beginning, the whole nation, the government, the business community and local governments all worked together to do their best. And I heard from many Jamboree leaders and participants that they were very satisfied.
The PPP also called for the government's proactive promotion of domestic seafood products to help the fishing industry, while the government vowed to continue conducting radioactivity tests and other measures until people feel fully assured about their safety. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
China's exports dropped for the fourth consecutive month in August, but the decline was less steep compared to previous month. Data from China's General Administration of Customs released on Thursday showed that exports fell 8.8% last month compared to August the previous year. But the decline slowed to a single digits for the first time since June, signaling that the country's manufacturing sector may be showing signs of improvement. Imports fell by more than 7% year-on-year. China remains under economic pressure as it faces a property crisis and an ongoing slump in manufacturing amid weak global demand. Over in Poland, South Korea's cutting-edge military technology continues to garner much interest at a defense trade show. Our correspondent Kim Jong-un has the latest.
On day 2 of the 31st International Defence Industry Exhibition in Poland, South Korean defense companies promoted a variety of weapons to win additional orders. Hyundai Rotem announced that it is discussing a second contract for K2 tanks with Poland, following last year's order of 1,000 tanks.
It is a little later than initially planned, but because it is such a large and long-term project, there are quite a few things that need to be discussed.
Hyundai Rotem's representative for Europe added that there are many neighboring European countries, including Romania and Lithuania, that are showing interest in replacing their tanks. Meanwhile, Hanwha Aerospace signed an MOU with state-owned defense firm Polish Armaments Group for the localization of its Chunmoo multiple-launch rocket system. Last year, Poland bought some 280 Chunmoo rocket launchers, and the MOU is expected to lead to a second deal in the near future. On top of this, Hanwha Group promoted its Tangbogo 3-class submarine, as the Polish Navy is actively looking to procure submarines as part of its recently relaunched Orca submarine program. S&T Dynamics, a South Korean defense manufacturer, also promoted its products.
Many Polish soldiers had a look. People showed great interest in the 1,500 to 1,700 horsepower transmission for the K2 tank and the 1,000 horsepower K9 transmission.
The CEO of Polish Armaments Group showed his appreciation for South Korea's cooperation and noted that the two countries are very similar in the sense that they both understand the dangers stemming from threats from a neighboring country.
We have entered a very far-reaching strategic cooperation already. If there's a threat to Poland or South Korea, then one country can help the other.
The CEO added that although it may not be visible now, he's confident that cooperation between the two countries will come into effect if one country is attacked. Choi Min-dang, Arirang News.
Following Japan releasing stored water from the defunct Fukushima nuclear power plant last month, local authorities in neighboring South Korea are making efforts to help the fishing industry. These include discount coupons, but more fundamentally, making sure that seafood items are safe. Our Moon Hae-ryun went to find out more.
More than a decade after an earthquake and tsunami damaged the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant, Japan began to release treated wastewater into the ocean on August 24th, sparking concern both home and abroad over the safety of seafood caught in these waters. Following that disaster back in 2011, South Korea's fishing industry also suffered for 2 years straight, with production falling as a result of weakened demand. To prevent this from happening again, South Korea's local governments have been setting up events all around the country over the past few weeks to promote the safety of local seafood and encourage consumption.
I'm here at one of the many events to help local fisheries sell products at a discounted price for consumers. This particular sale is supported by the local government of Gangwon-do province in the northeastern area of the country.
Booths from 6 different branches of the National Federation of Fisheries Cooperatives in the region are selling local produce like dried seaweed, scallops and octopus ahead of the national Thanksgiving holiday, Chuseok.
Our number one priority is to promote the safety of our seafood. With Chuseok coming up, we hope that people will have seafood on the table and feel reassured about its safety. We hope that things will return to normal soon, and we're focusing on minimizing the damage to our fishermen.
These discount events have been successful in selling products so far, with many stalls at this event selling out in just an hour.
I wanted to buy everything here, but it all sold out. So I only managed to buy some squid, seaweed and pollock.
People were able to buy products at a 30% discount, and merchants expressed their hope for more events like this.
I hope that regular events like this can be held to revitalize the local economy.
Local governments are also thinking of ways to directly provide financial support for fishermen.
We're currently planning on providing more direct support for fishermen, such as funding the cost of fuel for fishing boats and so on.
On top of discount events, buyers can receive coupons worth up to around 30% of the total amount they've spent at traditional fishery markets this month. This exchange coupon event is usually available during national holidays, such as Chuseok coming up at the end of the month, but will run throughout the entirety of the month this year after the government pledged nearly $30 million to make this happen. Buyers just need to show receipts from their purchases at market stalls at the coupon exchange booth to be issued their coupons.
But before local governments can promote their products to consumers, they first need to verify the safety of seafood with radiation detection machines such as this.
Every day, this laboratory in Gyeonggi-do district receives hundreds of seafood samples from various local markets and school catering companies before it's sold and served to consumers. These are placed in a gamma-ray spectrometer, which then detects whether the samples are radioactive or not. Results from the detector are recorded and posted on the websites of local markets and schools to ease buyers' and parents' concerns. With transparent and regular sharing of information, discount sales and direct funding for fishermen, local governments hope to lessen the impact the release of treated wastewater has on the South Korean fishing industry. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
In 2023, South Korea experienced its fourth hottest summer on record. And the authorities say it's a rare event to see monthly average temperatures from June to August, all higher than annual averages. This year is also making headlines globally for record-breaking heat waves and violent rainstorms. 신세벽 reports.
The summer of 2023 was the fourth hottest for South Korea. According to data from the Korea Meteorological Administration on Thursday, the nationwide average temperature from June to August this year was 24.7 degrees Celsius. That's a full degree above the norm, ranking the period as the fourth highest on record. Monthly average temperatures for the 3 summer months all surpassed annual averages, a rare occurrence that has happened only 3 times in the past half-century. Precipitation levels were also higher, with total summer rainfall over these months reaching nearly 1,020 millimeters, over 1 meter. That's well above the summer average of 727 millimeters. Despite this higher-than-usual precipitation, there were only 2 more rainy days than usual, indicating more frequent concentrated downpours. Temperature records were also shattered worldwide. Japan experienced its highest summer temperatures in 125 years, while the United States and European cities also witnessed record-breaking highs. In Phoenix, Arizona, the temperature exceeded 43 degrees Celsius for 31 consecutive days, setting a new record for the longest heat wave. Globally, June to August saw the highest ever recorded average surface air temperature of 16.8 degrees Celsius, surpassing the 2019 record by almost 0.3 degrees. In particular, the global average for the month of August was 16.8 degrees, which is 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. That is the not-to-exceed target for slowing climate change set by the 2015 Paris Agreement. So far, the year 2023 is the second hottest on record, just behind 2016. The World Meteorological Organization in its May report said there was a 98% chance that at least one of the next 5 years will be the hottest on record. 신세벽, 아리랑 뉴스.
We'll see 2 contrasting weather patterns across the nation tomorrow. Western regions, including Seoul, will be under stifling heat with daytime highs of 31 degrees Celsius. This is about 4 degrees higher than the seasonal average. For parts of the east, such as Daegwallyeong and Gangwon-do province, maximum temperatures will only get up to 23 degrees. And regardless of the readings, UV ray index will stand in the very high range nationwide. The peak hours for sun exposure are in between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. Exposure to extreme UV rays may lead to some serious skin aggravation. Make sure to wear your sun protective items when heading out. And strong winds are in the forecast for the East Coast. For the coastlines of Gyeongsang-do province, strong wind alerts are in place. The East Coast may even see high waves across the coastlines. And central regions will be under clear skies, while the south will see cloudy spells. Tomorrow, Seoul will be starting off at 20 degrees. And sunny skies will dominate nationwide. As for the daily highs, Seoul will peak at 31 degrees. Daejeon 29, Gyeongju will be topping out at 27 degrees. And mostly clear skies are expected until this weekend in Seoul, along with unseasonable heat. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is News Center for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.
Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
They're already being so determined without the person knowing what they're doing.
Oh my God, this is like a Zoom. This is like, it's getting serious.
도록 찾아 헤맨 사람을 만난 것 같아. 아마도 나의 영웅이야.
Lotte takes a new leap beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? Welcome. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Good evening, it's Thursday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Do-yeon, filling in for Kim Bo-kyung. If you're a fan of Korean dramas, your microwave may have been kept busy popping popcorn recently from the variety of shows to choose from on streaming services. The most popular among them right now are Netflix Mask Girl and Disney Plus Moving. The two are resonating well on the charts for non-English shows on their respective platforms. While they're from different competing streaming services and can't have them both at the same time like your onion and caramel popcorn, the two do have something in common. They are both adaptations of popular webtoons, which means the plots have been around for fans for quite some time. Meanwhile, things are different at the theaters. Korean films at the box office aren't doing that well, despite Korean content showing its competitiveness. So to discuss content on both streaming services and at the theaters, we have two experts joining us today in the studio. First, to my right, we have Professor Jason Beckerweiss of Kyungdong University, who's also a film critic. Welcome.
Well, thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
And to my left, we also have Professor Jae Seo from Seoul Institute of the Arts, who's also a filmmaker. Welcome.
Nice to be back.
Now, Professor, I wanted to start with you. Let's start with Mask Girl on Netflix, which topped the non-English chart for TV shows. Let's get straight to it. What's so appealing about the show?
Well, I really like this particular series. It's one of my favorite of the year. It follows this female character. We see her as she kind of develops this online personality, and we see it from her perspective, and it deals with lots of issues facing women in Korean society. But I think one of the reasons I like the show so much is because it reminded me of the energy that Korean films had back in the late 1990s, early 2000s, kind of approaching these issues using genre, experimenting with different kind of genre tropes. And you see that in this show, and it's just so well produced, so well made. It's wonderfully acted as well. Brilliant use of mise-en-scène, colors. The production design is just incredible. It's Yoo Sung-hee, who's worked with Park Chang-wook on films such as Old Boy, The Handmaiden, Decision to Leave. I mean, you can see that in the show. It almost feels like you're watching 7 movies. And so it was a very kind of binge-worthy drama. I couldn't stop watching it. I really enjoyed it. You know, some really strong female characters. And it also deals with some interesting themes in terms of revenge as well, which we've seen in Korean cinema time and time again. I mean, the famous examples including, of course, Park Chan-wook's Vengeance trilogy, Old Boy, Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, Lady Vengeance. We've seen countless other films, I Saw the Devil, and even earlier films such as The Housemaid. So it feels very Korean, quintessentially Korean in many ways. But yeah, just a superbly produced show.
Right. Now, Professor, so I wanted to talk about the other competing streaming content, Moving. What's so appealing about this show?
Well, it's one of the biggest budgets, for example, for Disney Plus, and it's studded. But basically, it's a show about, sort of in the vein of a lot of Hollywood stuff, about people with superpowers, so supernatural powers that they have. And we have a star-studded cast: Yoo Sung-young, Han Hyo-ju, basically Yoo Sung-bum, also Cho In-sung. Basically, I think most of the money was spent on the cast. But it's basically starts out very kind of like in a humble way with a high school student has superpowers that he can't control, and his mother, and it turns out, he has this because his mother is also kind of a super being as well. And this story is kind of this 20-part series with a big star-studded cast, and also includes all the themes about basically generational gaps, school sort of violence, and also just the hierarchy in Korean society, and also about North and South Korea, because some of the superpowers from the North side is also fighting with the South part. So that, and also just it's also about power, who has power in Korean society. So it's a kind of a sprawling kind of thing. But we haven't seen something where, usually this is more towards Marvel or DC, but this is Korea's attempt at trying to start this kind of franchise in a way. I think if this is that successful in its first season, I think we'll be seeing more of this. But I kind of like it because it takes a Korean stance on how, if you have superpowers, how you would use it. For example, one of the main characters is a high school boy, and the mother has taught the boy basically to hide his power, and sort of in the vein of Superman, basically be humble and all this. But of course, there are other characters with powers that are strength, flying, regeneration, all that stuff that are not as humble in this. So it's just a Korean K-drama with a superhero twist is the way I would see it, but really kind of a critical look at Korean society. Mm-hmm. So I think it's kind of Disney Plus's big hit.
Right. So building on from that, both of them are online streaming platforms. Multiple platforms have had popular content before, but it's rare that both Netflix and Disney Plus, the leading streaming services, have Korean content topping the chart at the same time. How do you view this situation? Is this an opportunity, maybe a new opportunity for Korean content to take a step further?
Well, I think it's really shown how far Korean content has come, but in the big game, big picture of the whole thing, more than Disney Plus, I think Netflix has really cleaned up with Squid Game, and they've had a lot of hits on their platform. And I think it's kind of funny that both Disney Plus and Netflix hit, sort of the number 1, 2 type of thing at the same time. Although, although there's a lot of talk about these shows being sort of the top billing, these basically streaming services don't really reveal the actual numbers. So, for example, in film, you have box office numbers, so ticket sales per person is actually like kind of an open information thing. But as you know, streaming services, that's their proprietary information, so they kind of hide that. But of course, you find it out by their own PR machine that'll kind of hype some show saying that, hey, for example, Squid Game is their biggest show ever, things like that. But I think going back to moving, I think, Disney Plus has not had a huge hit. I think the big bet is probably the one before that. And Netflix had Squid Game and all these other shows. So I think Disney Plus said, let's put all our chips into one show, really do it. And I think it was kind of a risk in a way, because is it better to kind of spread out your content, or is it better just to put all your money into one? And I think they tried this on that one, and luckily they succeeded. But I think, as I mentioned at the beginning, it just shows you the quality of Korean content is something that is watched all over the world. And especially with Hollywood right now having the writer's strike and the actor's strike going on, we're not going to see new content for the next 2 years, because all content produced is stuff that's made just before the strike, which is coming out now and next year. But 2 years from now, there'll be nothing. So I think right now it's an opportunity for Korean content to have a more foothold. They already have started stuff with all the K-drama stuff that they've done. And then, we had also the Oscar-winning Parasite movie that put Korean cinema on the map. So I think this is a good opportunity for them to kind of, I think, make it a regular thing for many years to come.
Well, that's a good point with the Hollywood writer's strike. Now, Professor, I wanted to shed light on where these films come from. They're both spin-offs of popular webtoons with plots that have already been received well by the Korean webtoon fans. And you've already spoken about the Koreanness of the show, Mask Girl, and Professor So also mentioned about the Koreanness of moving incorporated with the superheroes. So what do you think it is about both stories that help them resonate with the international audience when they come from a very Korean background?
Yeah, no, moving's really interesting because, science fiction has had a real uphill battle trying to get the content to connect with audiences here. Obviously the Marvel films have done really well, but science fiction as a whole has been very, very hit and miss. And there's just a whole long list of Korean films and shows that clearly directors want to make that have just not worked in Korea. I mean, Alienoid is probably one of the more recent examples. But moving, it's interesting how it's really connected. I haven't watched, I haven't finished it yet, but one of the striking features of the show, I mean, it's also written by the man who wrote the original webtoon, Kangpo, and I think he cares a lot about characters and characterization. And I think if you differentiate like Korean content from American content, I think one of the kind of striking characteristics or features of Korean content is characterization and how they are character-led. Sure, you have the spectacle and you've got the backdrop, but there's a big focus on characters and developing them. And I think if you watch a show like Squid Game, it spends like the first couple of episodes just focusing on the characters, which I think really helps the show as it moves forward because you really connect with them. Now, moving in a similar way does the same thing. We get to understand these characters, who they are. You know, one of them owns this chicken restaurant, one of them owns this like donkatsu restaurant, and they just feel very, very Korean. And I think audiences here really, really connect with those characters. And I think that's just crucial. And sure, you have the spectacle, you've got them flying around, you've got them doing, you know, acrobatics and all the rest of it. But ultimately, if people don't care about the characters, they don't care about the show. And I think moving, I think it works because of the characters. I mean, Yoo Seung-young, I think his character is really, he's just really endearing for much of the series, at least of the show that I've seen so far. And Han Yo-ju as well, who plays the owner of the katsu restaurant. They just feel very, very Korean, and I think they connect. And I think overseas as well, they're kind of different compared to, you know, your usual Marvel fare. And so I think that's one of the reasons why it's striking a chord overseas as well as domestically. So yeah, big emphasis on characters, and I think that's why this show, and also Maskell as well. I mean, Maskell focuses on one female character, and I think that really carries the whole show. And I think, yeah, that's one of the reasons why it worked for me.
That's right. I mean, Moving has episodes strictly for each character's introduction. So,
exactly.
Right,
So it's structured in that way, right? So you got the Yoo Seung-bom character, and I love the fact that he speaks this kind of English as well. And quite often, Korean actors, when they focus so heavily on delivering those English lines, and sometimes it can come across as like somewhat awkward. But with Yoo Seung-bom, he speaks English pretty well, and I think it just comes across so natural, and he really kind of embodies the character so effectively. And so yeah, it's just really well cast actually in an unusual way. I mean, Han Yo-ju, certainly the way she's introduced initially, it does come across as a little bit weird because she plays a much older character. She plays this mother figure. We learn more about her as it kind of goes back in time. But the casting is actually really interesting in the show. So it's kind of unconventional in that way, and that's another reason why it works.
Okay. Well, now, Professor So, you also already mentioned the writer's strike in Hollywood being an opportunity for Korean films to step up. But besides from this indirect effect, what's something that Korean content industry can do themselves to take a step further to make them more competitive at this
Well,
time?
One of the things about why Korean content is popular is that storytelling, and also, as you know, Jason pointed out, just the cultural nuances of, you know, I think, you know, mukbang is actually now an international word. You know, a lot of people take Korean words as something that, you know, is popular all over the world. So what K-content does is actually puts all these cultural things like, you know, all the K-pop stuff or the K-drama stuff and puts it in a really interesting kind of story format that's different from Hollywood. And sometimes the ending is very unexpected in a lot of these series. And also, you know, when you see a Hollywood movie, you kind of know what the 3-act structure is going to be. And usually there's a happy end and the good guy wins and all this. But in a Korean drama, you really don't know. It's more, I think, akin to maybe Game of Thrones, where you don't really know which direction things are going to go. And then the characterizations are sort of different. So I think people are really grappling onto that. And I guess, like, we're a Confucius society where family is the main thing. And even if you look at a successful movie like Parasite, it's about a family.
Yeah.
And a lot of these shows are about this kind of family structure, which is kind of disintegrating inside the story because of, we have problems with like low, birth rates, high cost of living, competitive society, and these are issues that all these storytelling sort of envelops. And I think what people find appealing about it is that it's happening all over the world. Especially with the COVID crisis that we had, society was very kind of insular, and they started just watching this Korean content, which I think really hit home to a lot of people during that time. I think, representation of like Squid Game, for example, it's about people that have and have not. And it's just a kind of a universal story. So for us to continue doing this, I always say this when I'm on the show is, we can't just rest on our laurels right now. This is really great. All the filmmakers that are making stuff now, it's good, but we need to kind of sort of train the next generation of new talent, like another Park Chan-wook or another Bong Joon-ho. And right now, the problem is that a lot of these, streaming platforms are just giving, content to people that are successful. In order for this to continue in the future, you have to kind of give independent films another chance, like a younger filmmaker that doesn't have, all the necessary curricula vitae for, their careers ready. But if you give them the chance to direct these things, and a lot of these series are directed by one person or two directors, things like that. I think it's not like that in the West. You actually give it out to about 7 or 8 directors. So I think we need to kind of diversify sort of the talent behind the camera a little bit. And also the actors as well. We're used to seeing the same faces over and over again, but I think instead of just giving them the opportunity, we really need to see new faces. And I think some of these shows, the side characters, sort of like the other characters, we have the main stars. Everybody goes to see them because of that. But the good acting that we see from people that are not less known is, I think, the great opportunity for Korean content to diversify.
That's right. We're talking about exciting stuff, but there is a grimmer news for the box office. Korean films have not been doing so well greatly. So how do you view this situation with domestic films?
Yeah, no, it's pretty depressing. 2 films have broken even this year. The Roundup, number 3, and also Milsu, or Smugglers. And even Concrete Utopia, it's done okay, but it still hasn't quite broken even yet. It will, and but yeah, it's a little bit of. It's trying to decipher what's going on. I mean, during the pandemic, it was clear that it was impacting cinema, the number of admissions being sold, or tickets being sold, rather. And now we're out of the pandemic. We've seen recovery in America. They had Barbenheimer over the summer, one of the busiest summers of all time. And yet, the film industry here seems to be struggling. And there's a lot of it. I mean, if you look at the consensus, there seems to be a consensus that it's partly due to streaming platforms, and also it's due to the fact that ticket prices have increased quite significantly, kind of ahead of inflation. And so going to cinema is just seen a lot more expensive now. And I mean, Korea used to be, certainly going to cinema used to be very inexpensive, and it used to be, couples will go frequently, and yes, couples still go on dates, but it just doesn't seem to be the kind of cultural occasion, or at least the frequency of it doesn't seem to happen as often as it used to. And so films now are they're opening kind of softer, and they're playing for longer. There's a film out this week, for example, called Sleep, and it stars Jung Eun-mi and Lee Sung-kyun, and the film's break-even point, I think, is around about 800,000 admissions. And I think they hoped that the film will play quite long, so for several weeks, for it to finally, sell enough tickets for it to kind of make a bit of money. And I think that just really kind of, underscores the precarious kind of situation the industry faces at the moment. Because on the one hand, yes, Korean cinema, Korean content is often in the news. We're here talking about it on this show, and we're lucky enough to be here to be able to report on what is a very exciting and vibrant industry. But cinemas films in cinemas are struggling, and it seems like the summer for me was a confirmation that something has changed. And I'm not sure we're going to see the number of films selling 10 million tickets. We're not going to see that as often as we used to. We'll see it occasionally, but it seems that with streaming platforms having really kind of transformed the ecosystem, and also the fact that it's just a lot more expensive, that seems to have had a great impact on cinema going.
So you're kind of putting the blame more on the system rather than the actual quality of the content.
Oh yeah, no, the quality of films, no, absolutely not. If anything, the films I've seen in cinemas this summer has actually been pretty good. I liked Smugglers a lot. I liked Concrete Utopia. And in fact, if you look at the films that did well over the summer, it's actually quite encouraging, because these are films that are not based on IP. Well, yeah, I mean, certainly not to the extent that you've got franchises or sequels. And I mean, Concrete Utopia is going to become a series. It has already got a sequel's already been made, and there's a series that's being produced. But I think these films are not your kind of conventional Korean blockbusters. They're different. I mean, Smugglers is this female-led movie. It's very colourful. It kind of evokes this kind of 1970s style. I mean, it's set in the 1970s, and Concrete Utopia is really bleak. And so I think if you're looking at the films that are doing well, actually they're good films, they're original films, and that's what really got me into Korean cinema in the first place, rather than these films that are very much reliant on conventions. So I guess it is bleak, but there is some kind of sense of optimism or hope. Yeah. That can be generated out of this somewhat bleak situation.
So building on from this, Professor, do you have any tips for the box office industry, like domestic films industry, to break through, kind of fight the system that's obviously an uphill battle because the quality, like Professor Beck.
If I knew the answer, I'd be a millionaire, I think, help the industry. But I think I agree with Jason, the ecosystem of Korean cinema and just entertainment in general has really changed because of the pandemic. It's all over the world like that. But I'm more optimistic because I think it's a temporary situation. We got used to having people watch streaming services at home during the pandemic, and then ironically, when the theaters had a chance to open up again, they should have not raised the ticket prices so high. It was bad timing on their part. So those two things kind of collided, and I think it really changed the way people's behavior for watching entertainment has happened. But I think what I find optimistic about Korea is that we're a very small country, luckily, because there's not much to do. I think after a while, the young people will still go to the malls, go shopping, eat at restaurants. And, it's still the cheapest form of entertainment so far, even though they raised the prices. I think that pattern is going to come back. But as Jason mentioned, the 10 million, ticket sales at the box office. It used to be all Korean cinema made their primary profits off of movie theaters. That's going to change. I think that way of basic profitability is something from the past. So we have to kind of figure out a system where we do this. But at the same time, what's interesting to me is that this conversation hasn't happened just because of the pandemic. It's been a war between television and cinema, for a long time, since 1950s. Yeah. And, so far cinema had that edge because big screen, good sound, surround sound, all this. But as you know, all the LED technologies had advanced to the point where you could actually have surround sound at your house easily. And your screen is so big, it kind of looks like a movie theater if you turn off the lights. So I think those things have changed, but I think what the behavioral pattern for what people do in terms of when they watch a series versus a film on a streaming service is different. When it's a film, the family kind of gathers around still. Sure. Yeah, and then they're eating something, but let's not all disparately go somewhere. Whereas if it's a series, there are a lot of bathroom breaks. People are looking at their phones. So there's still a respect for cinema, which is a one-time event. So if that's happening at the house,
with bigger commitment, right?
Yes, it's going to be naturally, a thing where it's going to be a trend. I think, suddenly the youth will be like, hey, let's go to the theaters again. I think, although we didn't do that well in the summer, it did better. And one of the reasons I think is last time we talked about was air conditioning. It was so hot this summer that people flocked to the cinemas because it was better air conditioning than at home. So we have to kind of figure out a new model to get people back in the cinemas. But I think the way to do it is basically kind of change the attitude of the distributors and try to get them back in the cinemas, but not raising prices and making it difficult for people to go back. But I think, again, I trust cinema. I think movies are something where, you know, it's not about you watching something by yourself, but with a whole bunch of people. So after when you come out, you can kind of hear a whisper, hear the whispers of other people, like either liking the film or disliking it, or afterwards, when you go eat your meal, you have something to talk about.
Right. I'm so sorry, professors. I could talk about this hours, but that's all the time we got for today. Thank you so much for your insights. I hope to speak to you guys again soon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching and goodbye.